point to learn some general information about organic compounds. The main component of organic compounds is carbon, and since carbon makes covalent bonds, very strong covalent bonds, organic compounds are important in biological organisms because that's what we are mostly made out of. We can divide the organic compounds into four main groups: the carbohydrates, such as breads; lipids, such as butter; protein, which is found in peanuts; and then nucleic acids. So again, three of these we talk about as far as foods. Nucleic acids hold our genetic information. Let's talk about each one in just very general terms. So carbohydrates act as an energy source. That's their main job in our bodies. We use carbohydrates for energy. Carbohydrates are only made out of three different atoms: oxygen, carbon, and hydrogen. And they always have a ratio of 1 carbon to 2 hydrogen to 1 oxygen. Doesn't matter how big or small the molecule is. An example, glucose, C6H12O6. So there's twice as many hydrogens as compared to carbon and oxygen. The building block molecule of the carbohydrate is called the monosaccharide, mono meaning 1. This over here is an example of a monosaccharide. Most monosaccharides have 5 or 6 carbons that make up the backbone. This one has 6. And then off of those carbons there are hydrogens and oxygens. Carbohydrates, when dissolved in a solution, can also form a ring structure. We can join multiple monosaccharides together to create a polysaccharide. Poly meaning many monosaccharides joined together. Okay, the next group is the proteins. Proteins are the most diverse group. They have many different jobs in our bodies. They act as structural components. The main job that we'll talk about in a couple of weeks is as enzymes. Enzymes are helper molecules that speed up reactions. Proteins also function as antibodies, which help our immune system fight off infection. The main building block of the protein is called the amino acid, and it always has the same components. It has a central carbon. Off of one side is an amino group, a nitrogen attached to hydrogen. Off the other end is a carboxyl group, C double bonded to an oxygen, single bonded to an oxygen. Off the top there's a hydrogen, and then off the bottom, that's the variable region, and that's what can change between the amino acids. So here it's just shown by the green square. A lot of times it's referred to as the R group, and there are 20 different R groups, so there are 20 different amino acids in living things. If we join amino acids together, we create a larger molecule called a polypeptide. Again, poly meaning many, so many amino acids forms a polypeptide. Okay, the lipids mostly function in energy storage. They can also be used as insulation for marine mammals, the blubber layer in whales, for example. And also, we find lipids in our cell membranes, which we'll talk about later as well. The example that I put on this slide is the fatty acid. Okay, and fatty acids have a carboxyl head, C double bonded to an oxygen, single bonded to an OH, and then the rest of it is the tail. And all the tail is carbons and hydrogen over and over and over again. This is very, very common for the fats, and it's the only molecule that has all of these carbon hydrogens over and over and over again with a carboxyl at one end. So we can divide fatty acids into two groups, saturated and unsaturated. Think of the S's going together. Saturated, single bonds, solid at room temperature. So stearic acid, the first one, is a saturated fat. It only has single bonds in this tail between the carbons and the hydrogens. It's going to be a solid at room temperature, so an example would be butter or lard. Unsaturated fats are different. They have double bonds in the tail, which create kinks in the tail. They can't pack as tightly together, and as a result, they're liquids at room temperature. So oleic and linolenic acid in this picture here are both unsaturated fats. Oleic acid has one double bond, creating a kink, and linolenic has 3 double bonds. So anytime you put a double bond, it no longer is a solid, it becomes a liquid and unsaturated. The last group is nucleic acids, which we'll talk about in more detail at the end of the semester. The job is genetic information storage, such as in DNA, and some of them also act as energy carriers. That molecule is called ATP. We'll learn more about ATP later on this semester. The building block of the nucleic acid is called the nucleotide, and it always has the same 3 components. It has a sugar, so it has a 5-carbon sugar or a carbohydrate, which is the center. Off of the sugar we have a phosphate group, which has a phosphorus. This is the only organic compound that we've talked about that always has a phosphorus. So that's one thing that you can look for when you're looking at a nucleic acid. And then we have a nitrogen base. So this has nitrogen similar to the amino acid that we talked about earlier. However, the nitrogen base is always a ring structure, and again it comes off of the 5-carbon sugar. Some examples, like I said, of nucleic acids are DNA, RNA, which carries the message from the DNA to make the protein, and then ATP, which is an energy carrier. And we'll talk a lot more about the nucleic acids later on this semester.